The council chamber smelled of blood and fear, and Yalin wondered if bringing a human had been a mistake. He stood alone in the vast glass corridor, his reflection staring back at him from the polished surface. Tall, slender, skin like silver. Under the cold lights. His ceremonial robes flowed like liquid metal, but even their elegance could not hide the tightness in his jaw. Behind him, footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate. Kalen Ward, the human bodyguard Earth had insisted on sending. Yalin hated this. His people, the Velan, prided themselves on precision, on control. Bringing a human into the negotiation chamber was neither. It was chaos wrapped in flesh. They said humans were unpredictable, Yalin muttered under his breath, glancing at the man following him. Kellen's stride was steady, his face unreadable under the black collar of his uniform. Compared to the towering Velan, Kalen looked almost fragile, shorter, broader, dressed not in gleaming armor, but a matte suit with faint seams of technology glinting at the cuffs. Yalin slowed his steps. Do you even understand what's at stake here? His voice trembled despite himself. One wrong word, one wrong gesture, and half the Korath Dominion will be on our borders within a cycle. Kalen didn't flinch. His blue eyes swept the corridor, calm and sharp, like a predator that already knew where every shadow hid teeth. I understand, he said, his tone so steady it made Jalin's pulse spike. You sound certain, Yalin hissed, his silver fingers curling. But certainty means nothing if the Dominion fires first. Do you think your presence will intimidate them? They see you as an animal, a soft, fragile creature. He paused, searching Kellen's expression for any sign of offense. There was none. Kalen stopped beside him, folding his arms across his chest. Let them think that. The words were quiet, but something in them carried weight like steel beneath silk. Yalin stared at him, baffled. He had studied humans. Their biology was inefficient compared to Velan physiology. Their lifespan was short, their reflexes unremarkable, at least by Velan standards. So why did this one speak as if the war was already over? They reached the docking ramp where the shuttle awaited. Through the viewport, the neutral station hung against the void, a spire of metal surrounded by flickering stars. It should have looked safe. Get DIDN single quotes T.JALEN. Urs hailed slowly and turned to Kalen. You never seem worried, he said, unable to stop himself. Even now, when everything could collapse. Kalen looked at him for a long moment, then gave a faint smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. Because wars aren't always fought the way they expect. The words chilled Yalin more than he wanted to admit. He boarded the shuttle in silence, Kalen following close behind. Engines throned, carrying them across the gulf of black space toward the station. Then Yalin saw it out beyond the rim of the viewport, silhouettes sliding from the void. Massive, angular, bristling with weapons. 1 dreadnought, 2, 5, 10. Korath banners burned crimson against the dark. They weren't here for peace. Yalin gripped the edge of his seat, every nerve alight with dread. Beside him, Kalen adjusted his cuff, calm as if he were preparing for tea. The diplomat's throat tightened as the comms filled with static, and then a single phrase from the now. Station's control tower, brace for impact. Asterisk, the laughter hit. First low, guttural, rolling through the grand chamber like a storm building in the distance. Yalin stepped inside and froze. The Korath were waiting. The negotiation hall was a cathedral of steel and shadow, its vaulted ceilings carved with war sigils. Massive columns framed the room, and between them stood the Korath generals, towering slabs of muscle and armor, their horns etched with battle scars that gleamed under the crimson light. They turned as Yalin entered, their eyes glinting like shards of obsidian. And then they saw him, Kalen, walking at Jalin's side like nothing in the galaxy could touch him. The laughter grew louder, One of the generals, a brute with tusks curling toward his jaw, stepped forward, his voice a grinding roar. This is your protector? He pointed a clawed finger at Kalen, a predator's grin splitting his scarred face. A soft-boned ape? More laughter erupted, shaking the chamber walls. The sound echoed in Jalen's bones, feeding the shame curling in his chest. He wanted to speak, to silence them, but his throat felt like sand. His species thrived on control, diplomacy, yet now, standing beside this quiet human, Yalen felt. Naked Ka-Yel-En didn't flinch, didn't speak. He just looked at them. That, somehow, was worse. Perhaps you misunderstand the purpose of this council. Yalen began, forcing calm into his voice. We are here to discuss terms? The tusked general snarled, cutting him off. No terms. You come crawling for peace because you know your fleets will burn. And what do you bring to ensure your safety? His eyes flicked to Kalen with contempt. A pet. The laughter hit again, louder this time, filling every inch of the hall. Jalen's blood boiled, humiliation digging its claws deep. He wanted Kalen to respond, to at least defend himself. But the human only stood there, hands behind his back, head tilted slightly, as if memorizing every angle of the room. Another general, slimmer but with razor-edged mandibles, strode forward and circled Kalen like a beast sizing up prey. He doesn't even carry a blade, the general hissed, baring teeth. Is that fear, human? Or arrogance? Kellen's voice came low, calm, cutting through the laughter like a blade through. Silk, neither, the mandible warrior sneered. Then prove it. Face me, a duel for honor. Jalen's stomach dropped. No, this would shatter everything. Enough, he snapped, stepping between them. We are not here for games of blood. The general ignored him, eyes locked on Kalen. Fight, ape, or crawl back to whatever dirt world spawned you. The chamber grew still, the weight of hundreds of watching eyes pressing down like gravity. Yalen waited for Kalen to refuse, to offer some diplomatic response. Instead, Kalen looked at the towering alien and smiled, not a wide grin, just a small, dangerous curve of the lips. I'm here for peace, Kalen said, his voice like distant thunder. And peace is what you'll have one way or another. The laughter faltered. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in the general's eyes. Yalen felt a chill crawl down his spine. He opened his mouth to speak to stop. But then the alarms began to wail. The walls trembled. Lights strobed crimson. Across the comms, the station commander's voice crackled in panic. All hands brace for impact. The Korath fleets have opened fire. Jalen's breath caught. He spun toward the massive windows. Beyond the station, stars blazed with sudden fury as dreadnoughts poured fire into the void. The war wasn't waiting for words. It had already begun. And beside him, Kalen Ward finally moved. He unbuttoned his jacket slowly, his face as calm as a man stepping into sunlight. The floor shuddered beneath their feet as the first salvo struck the station. Metal screamed, lights died, and the chamber plunged into chaos. Korath guards roared, their heavy boots thundering on the steel as they surged toward the exits. Generals barked orders over the comms, voices a jagged storm of rage and triumph. The war had begun not outside, but here, in the very heart of what was supposed to be neutral ground. Jalen froze. His throat locked, lungs refusing to pull air. His mind screamed, move, run, survive, but his body betrayed him. The ceiling lights strobed red, casting monstrous shadows across the towering columns as smoke curled through the room like ghosts. Beside him, Kalen Ward didn't run, didn't flinch, didn't even look surprised. He slipped his jacket off with the same ease a man might hang up his coat after a long day. For a heartbeat, Yalin thought the human had gone mad until he saw what gleamed beneath. The exosuit clung to Kellen's frame like a second skin, matte black with faint lines of cobalt pulsing under the surface. Its design was nothing like Velan battle armor, no bulky plates, no visible weapons. It looked alive, humming faintly as though drawing breath. Kalen touched something at his wrist. The blue lines blazed brighter, and the air around him thrummed. A deep bass vibration Yalin felt in his bones. "Stay behind me," Kalen said quietly, his voice almost lost in the wail of alarms. What are you?" Yalin choked. Words. Breaking like glass. Kalen didn't answer. Asterisk, the doors at the far end exploded inward as Korath soldiers stormed in. Black-armored giants wielding plasma axes and rifles that could cut a Velan cruiser in half. They saw Kalen and laughed again. Then Kalen moved, not like a man, not like any living thing Yalin had ever witnessed. One instant he was standing still. The next, the air cracked as he launched forward, a blur of black and cobalt. The nearest. Korath raised his weapon, but Kalen was already there, his hand snapping up to seize the alien's wrist. A twist, a crunch, and the rifle clattered to the floor as its owner dropped with a scream. Before the others could react, Kalen spun, a low sweep shattering another warrior's legs. He didn't kill. He didn't need to. Every strike was precise, economical, disabling with surgical efficiency. In seconds, 3 Korath lay writhing on the floor, their weapons shattered beside them. Asterisk. Yalin staggered back, pressing himself against a pillar, his mind reeling. This wasn't strength. It was something else: speed, precision, an elegance so lethal it felt inhuman. Kellen's voice came through the chaos, calm and cold as a winter blade. Door lock. The chamber systems obeyed, metal slabs sealing the exits before the Korath could call reinforcements. Kalen reached to his belt, pulling free a small black device. He slapped it onto the central control console. "Encryption override," the suit murmured in a voice that wasn't human. Fleet interface engaged. Yalin stared as Kellen's fingers danced across a holographic screen looming in midair. Lines of alien code streaming past like rivers of fire. What are you doing?" Yalin whispered. Kelen didn't look up. "Ending this." Outside, the battle raged, a maelstrom of fire and wreckage spinning against the stars. Dreadnoughts loomed like iron gods, their cannons vomiting light across the void. But then, one by one, their engines sputtered. Shields flickered. Weapons fell silent. Yalin's heart hammered as he watched the impossible unfold. Korath ships, once mighty, now drifted powerless, their systems choked by something unseen. And Kalen. Kalen didn't stop. Asterisk, the world narrowed to the hum of Kellen's suit and the heartbeat pounding in Yalin's ears. Smoke curled like ghosts from shattered consoles as crimson warning lights strobed through the chamber, painting Kalen in alternating bands of shadow and fire. 3 minutes. That's what the human had promised. Outside the viewports, the war raged, or it had, until the first dreadnought flickered and went dark. Its weapons fell silent like a throat-crushed mid-battle cry. Then another. Yalin couldn't look away. "How?" he whispered. His voice sounded thin, like something fragile breaking in an empty room. Kalen didn't answer. His fingers moved across the floating holoscreens in smooth arcs, like a pianist drawing music from light. Alien code cascaded in rivers of fire. Entire command hierarchies rewritten in seconds. He wasn't fighting them ship by ship. He was unmaking them, cutting the throat of an empire with silence. The Korath generals had stopped laughing. Now they stood frozen, eyes wide, watching as everything they trusted, their fleets, their power, their certainty, crumbled like dust in their fists. One slammed a fist into the console, snarling. Cut him off. Shut the human down. The chambers. Systems tried to obey, but Kellen's suit pulsed once blue light, rippling across every surface like a tide of fire. Then the consoles went dark, sealed from within. Kellen's voice was calm, almost gentle. Your ships won't fire. Your engines won't move. In 90 seconds, every command relay in your Dominion fleet will be ash in the wind. The mandible-faced general lunged with a roar, claws flashing. Kalen didn't even look up. His left hand shot out, caught the alien's wrist mid-strike, and bent. Bones snapped with a sound that tore through the chamber like a gunshot. The warrior collapsed, screaming, while Kalen stepped over him like he was nothing more than debris. Jale and pressed his back against the cold wall, his veins filled with ice. He had seen soldiers fight, ships burn, entire colonies razed. But nothing like this. This wasn't war. It wasn't even combat. It was inevitability. Outside the station windows, the last dreadnought's engines flickered and died. The stars swallowed the glow of its weapons. Silence fell, a heavy, suffocating silence broken only by the shallow, terrified breaths of Korath generals who had never known defeat. Kalen closed the final command string with a flick of his wrist. The holoscreens dissolved like smoke. He straightened, rolling his shoulders as though shedding a weight that had never truly touched him. Time elapsed, 180 seconds, 3 minutes. He turned to Yalin, and for a moment, the diplomat saw something behind those human eyes, something vast and cold, like the void between galaxies. It's done, Kalen said softly. His voice didn't boast. It didn't need to. The Korath generals stared in horror, their tusks trembling, their claws curling helplessly at their sides. Entire armadas silenced without a single drop of blood spilled, because one human decided it should be so. Kalen stepped closer to the central dais, his boots ringing. Against the steel like a judge, walking to the bench. His gaze swept over the alien warlords, calm as a predator who had already eaten. You came here for war, he said, voice carrying like a blade through still water. You'll leave in peace. One of the generals tried to speak, his voice breaking. You can't hold us all. We are Korath. Kellen's head tilted slightly. You were Korath, he corrected softly. Now you're something else. Survivors. He turned to Yalin, his tone shifting as though nothing had happened, as if the universe hadn't just bent around his will. Shall we resume negotiations? Yalin couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His entire species had measured humanity and found them small, fragile, weak. But in that moment, staring at the calm, unshaken man before him, Yalin understood the truth. Humans didn't win wars because they were strong. They ended wars because they refused to fight by anyone else's rules. Kalen adjusted his cuff, the faint blue glow of his suit dimming as if the storm had passed. He offered Yalin the smallest of smiles, a kind that promised something far more terrifying than death. Peace. On humanity's terms. The chamber was silent, now too silent. The kind of silence that presses against your skin, like cold iron. Yalin stood in the center of that stillness, staring at the Korath generals who had, moments ago, been gods in their own eyes. Now they looked smaller, like statues cracked, down the middle, hollowed out by fear. Their ships' entire fleets hung dead in the void, engines cold, weapons locked in permanent slumber. Kalen Ward stood among them like a shadow that had learned how to breathe. His exosuit's glow faded to a soft pulse, the cobalt veins dimming until only the matte black of its surface remained. He looked calm, almost bored, as if this victory, the complete disarmament of an empire, had cost him nothing. Jalen's mouth was dry. His thoughts, usually sharp as crystal, scattered like dust in a storm. He'd come here to negotiate, to argue, persuade, to hold the fragile threads of peace together with words. But words were meaningless now. Peace had been forged in silence, in fear. In 3 minutes. Sit, Kalen said, his tone flat but edged with something colder than any blade. We'll finish what we started. The Korath generals hesitated, rage and humiliation warring in their eyes. One, a towering beast of a warrior with tusks curved like sickles, clenched his claws until black blood welled from his palms. Yalin braced for a final act of defiance, a last suicidal charge. But it never came. The general lowered himself. To one knee, the sound of metal plates scraping against the floor echoing through the hall. One by one, the others followed. Yalin swallowed hard. He'd seen treaties signed before. He'd seen battles ended and enemies humbled. But never like this. Never with such absolute, terrifying simplicity. When Kalen spoke again, his voice was almost gentle. You'll transmit orders to your fleets. Full compliance. No resistance. Confirm it now. A general growled deep in his throat, but the defiance burned out before it could spark. They obeyed. Clawed fingers tapped shaky commands into their consoles. Outside, the dead fleets flickered with faint signals acknowledging surrender. Yalin turned his head slowly toward Kalen. How did you do that? His voice sounded alien in his own ears. Kalen didn't look up from his datapad. Wars are loud, he said softly. Peace needs silence. There was no triumph in his tone, no arrogance. Just a simple statement, like a man remarking on the weather. That chilled Yalin more than anything else. He wanted to ask more how Earth had built this technology. How many more like Kalen walked among the stars? But then he saw the datapad screen reflected in the gloss of the floor. For a split second, before Kalen closed it, Yalin saw a list, a long list. Each entry stamped with a word that burned into his mind. Project Quiet Dawn Success Count, 47, 40-7 dot. This wasn't humanity's first silent war. Jalen's stomach turned to stone. His people had thought of humans as quaint, emotional, primitive. But this was precision beyond cruelty. Mercy wrapped around annihilation. He forced himself to speak, to keep his voice steady. If the galaxy learns what happened here, they won't, Halen said, sliding the datapad into his jacket. His eyes flicked to Yalin, calm as ever, and if they do, they'll draw the wrong lesson. Yalin blinked. What lesson? Kalen smiled faintly, the kind of smile that doesn't touch the eyes. That humans like winning wars. A pause. Truth is, we hate them. That's why we end them fast. The words hung between them like a blade suspended by a thread. Beyond the viewport, the stars burned bright and cold, and in their light, Yalin saw a truth his people would never understand until it was too late. Humanity's strength wasn't in numbers or muscle. It was in the quiet certainty of men like Kalen Ward, the kind who could break empires with their hands and then walk away without looking back. Kalen gestured toward the exit. Come on, Diplomat. Time to sign your peace. Yalin followed, his steps hollow against the steel. Behind him, the Korath generals knelt in silence, broken not by blood or fire, but by something far worse, inevitability. Asterisk. The docking corridor stretched ahead like a vein of silver, pulsing faintly with the station's emergency lights. The hum of life support filled the silence, a sound so ordinary it felt surreal after what had just happened. Yalin walked in, a daze, his diplomatic robes whispering against the steel, his pulse thrumming like a war drum. Kalen moved beside him, silent, every step measured and unhurried. There was no swagger, no sign of straying. You wouldn't think this was the man who had just unraveled an empire in 3 minutes. But Yalin knew better now. The calm wasn't indifference. It was something worse. Control so absolute it bordered on terrifying. The cum implant in Jalen's skull pulsed again. He risked a glance at the encrypted message hovering in his vision. Earth requests audience. Urgent. His throat tightened. Until now, Earth had been a junior player in galactic politics, respected, but not feared. That illusion shattered in those 180 seconds. Now Yalen understood the truth. Earth didn't posture because Earth didn't need to. Kalen slowed as the corridor opened into the docking bay. The shuttle gleamed under sterile lights, its engines humming in readiness. Yalen stopped short, his voice catching on a question that had burned in his mind since the chamber. "Why me?" he asked. "Why send me to this negotiation?" "With you?" Kalen turned his head, those blue eyes catching the glow of the emergency strips. For a heartbeat, they seemed almost luminous cold stars in a human face. "Because you're not stupid," Kalen said. "And because you'll keep your mouth shut." The words hit like a blade drawn slow. Yalen swallowed, tasting iron in the back of his throat. "And if I don't?" Kellen's smile was soft. Harmless, almost. "Then you'll never have to worry about another negotiation again." Before Yalen could speak, Kalen stepped past him and into the shuttle. The hatch hissed open, swallowing the human in a breath of sterilized air. Yalen followed because what else could he do? His life, his people's fate, the shape of galactic power, everything had shifted in those 3 minutes. The shuttle lifted off, gliding through the bay doors and into the ink-black void. Through the viewport, Yalen watched the Korath dreadnoughts hanging dead and silent, like titans slain by invisible hands. He forced his voice out, barely more than a whisper. "What are you, Kalen?" The human didn't look up from his datapad. He spoke as if reciting a simple fact, something so ordinary it needed no emphasis. "Ambassador of Compliance," he said. "Project Quiet Dawn." Yalen blinked, the words like a knife sliding between his ribs. "Project what?" Kellen's fingers moved lazily across the screen, dismissing encrypted files with a flick. "You think this was the first time?" "No, this was number 48. 48. Jalen's blood turned to ice. 48 silent wars, ended without fleets, without open fire, just humans in dark suits, rewriting history while the galaxy slept. Kalen finally looked up, and Yalen wished he hadn't, because behind those eyes wasn't cruelty or malice. It was certainty. A calm, merciless certainty that Earth would never fight a war by anyone else's rules. "Why?" Yalen whispered, his voice raw. "Why do this?" Kalen leaned back, the faint hum of his exosuit dimming as it powered down. "Completely." His answer was soft, almost kind. "Because wars kill too many. Because negotiations take too long. Because someone has to keep the galaxy quiet." He turned his gaze back to the viewport, watching the cold stars slide past like ghosts. "And if fear is the only language they understand," his smile returned, sharp and weightless, "then fear will speak for us." Yalen stared at him, his breath shallow, his thoughts fracturing under the weight of revelation. He had believed he understood the balance of power. He had believed the galaxy was predictable, bound by treaties and tradition. But the truth was, here, sitting 3 feet away in human skin, Earth didn't seek war. Earth ended it. Began. Before anyone even realized, they were already defeated. The stars outside burned bright and cold as the shuttle vanished into the endless dark, carrying with it a secret that would shatter empires if it ever slipped free. Kalen didn't glance back, didn't need to. His voice, when it came, was almost a whisper meant for no one, and yet for everyone who would one day learn what he already knew. "Peace isn't given," he said. "It's engineered." And then silence. Asterisk the end.